Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I'm going to be talking to you about what I've been reading and I'm currently reading and a couple of book reviews that I have coming. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to be starting with the book Standing Heavy. This is by GauZ. This is a short book. I think it's technically, a novel. It's novel length. It's just under 200 pages long. And this is a work that I would call literary fiction. It was published in 2014 in French and came out in English just in 2022. The edition that I have is put out by Biblioasis, an independent book publisher, and it was shortlisted in 2023 for the International Booker Prize, which I have various feelings about, but we won't get into that. Let's just get into the book. So, this book is largely about the Black immigrant experience, specifically the Ivorian experience, which would be people who are from the Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire, and it is about their experience as immigrants in France. This book takes place over a period of three different time periods. It's written in three different styles, and there are three different points of view that we're following. Well, basically, three different points of view. And it gets a bit complicated from there on out, if that wasn't already complicated enough. And I'm going to look at my notes here to make sure that I get it correct. But we are following in what is called the Bronze Age in the book. 1960 to 1980. Our protagonist during that time period is Ferdinand, and he is trying to make his way in France and figure out what is going on there and what his place is and that kind of thing. It is a place that he has been encouraged to go to, and he is trying to basically make a life or at least experiment with a life there. We also cover the time period of 2010s, and that portion is told in a series of short observations about what the security guards are seeing, most particularly, I believe, in a Sephora. And then we also have two other characters, Osiri and Kasum, and they're in the golden age of this immigrant experience, which is considered 1990 to 2000. And they arrive just as some major changes in immigration policy take place. Given everything going on in the US, I think that this is a really good book to read, even though it's taking place in a different country. It's just interesting to see the parallels, the similarities, things that are different, that kind of thing. This book talks a lot about the immigration experience, as I mentioned. It also gets into classism, racism that immigrants experience, as well as the changing of policy surrounding immigration in France. In all three of the different time periods, in some ways, it gets into discussion of that. For me, the highs of this book were definitely the humor. There were some very humorous, sort of sarcastic moments in the book. I would also say that I would categorize this kind of as a satire of things. There are a lot of sort of outlandish type situations happening, as well as some very serious ones. I thought the pacing of the book was very good. It moves along very quickly. You go from times where you have very short paragraphs, like I said, when you are with the security guards, where it's literally just a paragraph long observation of what they're seeing. And those are broken apart by the other two narrative stories where it's written out in longer prose. And here's a page that has an example of what I was talking about, where you have the shorter paragraphs where each of them has like a heading of like what it is that the guards are observing and then the quick observation. For me, the lows of this book had to do with the structure and plotting more than like the structure and plotting helped you get through the book at a good pace, but the structure and plotting of the book was also one of the most confusing elements of it for me. And by that I mean I had a hard time keeping track of what perspective we were in, because other than labeling the time period, there was no indication that you were switching perspective, and there is some overlap between when the characters exist, like they know each other for the most part. And so just having a person's name mentioned didn't necessarily help you figure out what time period you were in. And so I felt like that made it a little bit complicated to follow. I feel like this was a book that at the beginning really wasn't my favorite. Oh, and I have to be honest, literary fiction isn't always my favorite because I do sometimes feel like the focus is more on the writing style than it is on the story itself. I just ended up thinking this book was okay. I gave it 3 stars. It did end better than it began for me. I think for me, my least favorite part was the beginning of the book and trying to decode what was going on. It just felt unnecessarily complicated. But by the end of the book, as I started to understand the message and themes that were in this book and started to be able to appreciate the humor and was able to get past the writing style and format, I did enjoy it towards the end. And so a three for me usually ends up meaning that I kind of felt torn about the book in the end. And I think that's pretty accurate for me. If you tend to really like literary fiction and you enjoy when people do experimental things with their writing style and the formatting in their writing, then you may not have any issues with this book and you will probably really enjoy it. Either way, I think this book is great for anybody who wants to read more stories about immigrant experiences from around the world. If you're looking for a good translated fiction, I mean, the writing in here is really good. It really was just a personal preference for me. I do think you have to like books that cover multiple points of view and that have multiple different writing styles. And I've read quite a few books like that recently, and I'm realizing that's not something I enjoy. I don't mind multiple points of view, but I like the writing style to stay the same. Otherwise, to me, it all just feels too chaotic. And that was a little bit of my experience with this. That said, there are quite a few people, it seems like, who are all reading this book right now or have read it in this past year, and certainly probably read it in 2023 when it was shortlisted. So I would definitely encourage you to go and look at some other people's reviews, especially people who liked it, who maybe read more literary fiction than I do, and you may find that they have something else to say about this. So that is standing heavy for me. After that, I moved on to another work that is also world literature. I am trying to incorporate more literature from around the world and more translated literature into my life because I just think that people from around the world have interesting and different stories to tell than the ones that I tend to hear every day. Or, like in the case of Standing Heavy, I find that they have similar experiences that are going on around me, but maybe from a different cultural background or that kind of thing. I don't know. I think reading from around the world is really cool, so I'm trying to do more of that. The next book I read is Only God Can Make a Tree. Now, this is not a translated work. It is by Bertram Roach, who is a Caribbean author, and he wrote this book in English. This is a work of historical fiction, was published in 2008, and has to do with the local Black Caribbean experience on the islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I'll be honest, until I randomly started picking books from around the world to read, I was not familiar with this set of Caribbean islands, so that was kind of a cool thing to come up as well. This is a multi-generational story following the Murphy family, which is a mixed race family consisting of a Irish immigrant father who has come from Ireland, originally heading to the US, but ends up stopping within the islands of St. Kitts and Nevis and ends up being encouraged to stay there. His family ends up being made up of him and his Black Caribbean wife, and it largely in the end ends up following their mixed race son, who is basically described as a social climber. His name is Adrian. We get quite a bit of Adrian's life, and we also additionally get a little bit of his son's life as well as his grandson's life. But the vast majority of the book, like I said, is following Adrian as he tries to navigate and experience the complicated race situation that exists on the island at the time. This book is set, I'm not sure that it sets a specific time period, but at the time this book is set, the slaves on the island have basically been liberated at this point, and they have been working for quite a few years just as servants or farmers in their own right on the various estates across the island. There is a lot of cultural information about Caribbean life in this book, as well as discussion of racism, classism, and the changing of the master slave to master servant relationship, as well as the change that happened amongst the landowners as a lot of people left the Caribbean islands because they no longer knew how to relate to their workers if they weren't slaves, and new people came in and bought their property. This book is full of a ton of island life drama, as Bertram Roach himself even kind of indicates in the beginning of the book. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that there is an opening page in this book where the author talks about how all the stories in here, he has changed the name and the people, but that it is basically based on his real life experience of what life on the island can be like. And the tone that he says all this makes me think that he understands you're going to find some of what happens in the book really unbelievable, but that he wants you to know, like, this really is life here. The other thing that I found the author shared is that he wanted to write this story because he felt like that there were a lot of people over the centuries who have come to this island and have, written in their journal or their diary their experience, and that they were all European people, and that they would then go home and share this experience, and that people were getting some particular idea about the island and not really understanding it. And as somebody who was native to the island, he wanted to write a story basically in their own voices. I would say for sure the high in this book had to do with the plot. The pacing of the book at times was breathtaking in terms of things like, one of the major world wars happens in the matter of 3 paragraphs in the book. But it also leads to a lot of like page turner drama happening. I will say that if you read this book solely for the plot, pop yourself a bag of popcorn and get ready for a ride. It was nonstop action. I mean, I can see why he prefaced it and being like, you may not believe that this all happened, but it really kind of did. I agree. I'm not sure I believe it all, but I really kind of do. Um, it was insane at some points. Like, and by the end of the book, maybe the last like 10 pages, I was like, what? I couldn't help myself. I got sucked in. I had to go and like talk to my bestie booktuber friend and be like, I've just got to recount to you what happened in this book. And like at one point, she like sent me a little popcorn picture, like this book is wild, and I was like, yes, it is. That said, there were a lot of things that I could complain about in this book, but I think the one that I'm going to focus on is just the writing. The writing was just very okay. It definitely could have used some more editing. There were definitely some cliches in the book. It came across as like a first novel, a debut novel, and a writer who's just starting to find their footing. But that said, I still say good for him for, basically writing what is one of the island's few novels, as far as I know, and written by someone that's from that island. And, kudos for you. I think that's a major accomplishment. And I think that he does have something there. Like, he had a story to tell. And he had the language to tell it in. I think it's just a matter of growing as a writer. And if he came out with other books, I would probably be interested in picking them up. I think it's a really unique perspective he has to share about Caribbean life. I think he put together a really fascinating story in and of itself. I think just more experience could lead to it being told even better. That said, because there were so many cliches and so much repetition, it did at times impact the characterization of people, and it would sometimes make like the messaging come across kind of awkward. So I did only give this book a 3 stars as well. I was really hoping that it would get to the point where it was better than that, but it really never just did. Like I said, though, if you just want a simple, crazy story to read, this is definitely one of them. This is also a good book if you would like to read about Caribbean life or this set of islands from Own Voices perspective. If you are looking to read more books from around the world and you're looking to read a book that is set in the Caribbean, and if you just like some good drama in your story, especially within family life, like this could also be it. Next, I have a couple of books to talk to you about that I have finished reading, but I'm not going to review in this video. The first one I'm going to talk about is Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. This is a book that I read as part of my Ultimate High School Rereading Challenge that I'm doing with Alex as a stay-at-home reader. And this is a book that was off my high school required reading list, and we read it together. And yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this book. I have tabbed it and thought about it and discussed it and researched it, and Alex and I plan on talking about it at length. That will be a separate video that will be on my channel. So if you would like to hear our discussion, and my thoughts and her thoughts on To Kill a Mockingbird, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you'll see when that video gets posted. The next book that I read and finished is Kokoru by Natsume Soseki. This is a book that I read for my book club that I'm hosting with my channel members. It's our September read. I like to have plenty of time to read the books and to have read them well ahead of our book club discussion, so I went ahead and knocked this off my list. I have been wanting to read this work of Japanese literature for quite a while, and it was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading and discussing this with them. If you would like to read and discuss it with us, just join our channel membership and come along for the ride. It should be really interesting. I will say, having read this book now, please, please, please look at the content warnings. There is a very serious discussion at the end of this book about one of the characters and life choices that he's making that can very much be triggering for people I know. So please make sure you look at those before you read this. I would suggest that to anyone, whether you're participating in our book club or not. That book club will be held on Zoom, and I will put the date up on the screens. I do not record the book club discussions because we all get on there and then Zoom saves that video for their own proprietary uses, which I don't like, but I do love the fact that we're all able to get on there and discuss with one another. And so because of that, though, those videos aren't recorded. So it's kind of a attend or you miss it kind of situation. And yeah, that's it. I have 2 books that I'm currently in the middle of reading. This is like the second week in a row where I've only been reading 2 books at a time. One is Clarissa and one is Fingersmith, though that's only going to last for like the next 30 minutes because I'm definitely about to start a different book. I will say that I am listening to Fingersmith on audiobook, and I really want to start and finish the physical book that I'm about to start as soon as possible, because this is a book that I really think I'm going to want to physically read. I am really enjoying this. If you don't know what Fingersmith is about, it is set during Victorian times, and it is about a young lady who is orphaned and ends up growing up in basically a band of thieves, if you will. And she has a very caring, loving household as far as she's concerned. But then her life changes one day when gentleman, as they call him, comes along with a proposal not for marriage, but for basically a sort of heist or a trick on a wealthy family, and particularly on a wealthy young lady in the family. And Sue, the main character in the book, is finding that she is to play a prominent role in helping gentleman achieve his goals, and she has a reward in store for her if they're able to pull off this heist, shall we call it. And yeah, I'm just really enjoying it. I think the language in this book and the way she's able to just set the scene to really feel like you're reading a Victorian novel and not just that it's set in Victorian times is absolutely brilliant. I think this is the first book that I've read that is historical fiction, a contemporary read, but feels like could be a work by Charles Dickens. And yeah, like I was saying, I really want to sit down and get to physically reading this, but in the meantime, the audiobook is really good and I'm enjoying that. Okay, I said way more about a currently read than I typically do. I'm going to end it here. That's what I'm reading. Let me know what you're reading, and I will talk to you next time.